think it's very necessary that we talk about our continent. I think this is very alarming, what's happening right now in Sudan. And before we make any comments, let's just watch this video. I'm going to come back and make a comment a little bit later.
A high risk of biological hazard. That was the warning from the World Health Organization on Tuesday after one of Sudan's warring parties seized a laboratory in the capital Khartoum. Dr. Nima Saeed Abid, the WHO's representative in Sudan, said the National Public Health Laboratory houses measles and cholera pathogens as well as other hazardous materials.
That is extremely dangerous because we have polio isolates in the lab, we have measles isolate on the lab, we have cholera isolate in the lab. So there is a huge biological risk associated with the occupation of the Central Public Health Lab in Khartoum by one of the fighting parties.
So this is very shocking, very scary situation. Biolabs in Sudan, taken under the hand of army group. That's very scary. Initially, we thought it was two generals fighting each other. Okay, that was the narrative we heard. Two Sudanese generals that have worked together. The General Al-Burhan against the General Adam Dagalo. They were actually fighting each other, looking to see who's going to run the country. After toppling the previous president, they got into a situation where they were discussing on who's going to be the president. Who's not necessarily the president, but who's going to run the army, and I can understand that. That happens quite a lot in these kind of situations. Then we heard CNN come up with a story saying that there were members of Vagner groups in Sudan. Watch this.
The Sudanese and the Libyan armies celebrated a successful joint operation Wednesday, April 19th, near the remote desert border between Libya and Sudan, having captured the Chevrolet garrison belonging to the rival Sudanese paramilitary rapid support forces, the RSF. But why is this garrison important, given how far it is from the existential fight in Sudan's capital, Khartoum? Because CNN can reveal that the fight in Khartoum is being influenced by what was happening at that garrison, a Russian resupply campaign backed by a key regional player aimed at turning the tide in Sudan's war in favor of the RSF, who have been a key recipient of Russian training and military aid. In collaboration with All Eyes on Vagner, a research group focusing on Russian proxy Vagner, CNN investigated the group's current presence in Libya. You can see here on April 16th, one day after the fighting began in Khartoum, a Russian Ilyushin 76 transport plane at the Al Jufra base in Libya, previously identified by American intelligence as a Vagner base. 3 days later, this same plane is spotted by flight tracker aviation expert Gurjan, coming back from the Russian airbase in Latakia, Syria, before returning to the Libyan airbase in Khadim. Images of that same plane began circulating online April 17th, heading in the direction of Sudan. Sudanese and regional sources tell CNN that weaponry was airdropped to the RSF within that time frame, April 15th to April 18th, to the Chevrolet garrison during a period of fierce fighting, boosting the RSF. The Al Khadim and Al Jufra bases, where the Wagner planes departed from in Libya, are under the control of Field Marshal Khalifa Haftar, who commands territory in the east of Libya. Haftar and the commander of the Rapid Support Forces, Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, aka Hemeti, have in common strategic alliances. One with Wagner, who Haftar is hosting in his territory in Libya, and whom a previous CNN investigation exposed as working with Hemeti to extract Sudanese gold. A second with the United Arab Emirates, who tapped Hemeti to send forces to the conflict in Yemen and backed Haftar in the fighting in Libya.
So how crazy is this? So we first think that it's Sudanese fighting each other in the name of power, in the name of freedom, in the name of democracy. Then we hear, as per CNN, there are members of Wagner groups, Russian soldiers in Sudan. That makes it even more complicated. Then we hear that there are military from the US that are brought into Sudan in order to evacuate US personnel. Isn't that a little bit crazy, a little bit worrisome? We first think it's Sudanese with themselves, fighting each other, right? Let's just think here. Sudanese fighting each other. Then all of a sudden, this Wagner group, and then Americans fighting each other on a proxy war, because it is clearly becoming a proxy war in Africa. When did it be acceptable that two foreign countries can just come to Africa? Okay, let's just go mess over there. you know what, we're not going to fight each other. We don't want to bring mayhem in America. We don't want to bring mayhem in Russia. Let's just go to Africa, to Sudan, and let's bombard each other. I'm going to sponsor these guys. You're going to sponsor those guys, and we're going to fight each other and see who's strong. Why don't they just bombard each other once and for all, and so we can just live in peace? That's another alternative. We don't need a war in Africa, do we? So this is not just about the war. This is now a real problem. It's an health issue, an health hazard. We're talking about P4 Laboratories. These are labs that keep the most vicious viruses you can possibly imagine. Yes, more vicious than Ebola, more vicious than any other thing you can think about. Okay, and this is within working frame of citizens. And one article says that one of the labs has been occupied by army, like armed soldiers, armed military personnel. They've made it a military camp. So they have literally transformed the lab, the biolab that's got viruses and bacteria and super bacteria into a military camp. How intelligent is that? Now, what do we expect happening later? What can we expect? I mean, as thinking humans, what can we expect to happen? When human beings out of their own will, or whether, we don't know, maybe they're lying to us, we don't know. I mean, let's go with the first one. Human beings with the right brain, going to a lab and transforming it into a military camp. What can you expect out of that? You got it. Let's say maybe it's just a lie. Maybe they're just using that as an excuse. Now, is that not an excuse good enough to spread whatever they want to spread in the name of, okay, military personnel obviously went there. That's probably the reason why you're seeing people fall left, right, center. I don't think this is a good idea, fellas. Accepting all these things in our countries with no expertise ourselves to run these things, it's extremely dangerous. Sudan is a country that's bothering the Democratic Republic of Congo. I think Kenya on the right-hand side, Uganda and other countries and Ethiopia and stuff. What are the probabilities that this disease, or if there's any disease, could cross over the border and go to the next country and get sprayed like nothing before? We need to value ourselves, fellas. I mean, we were very lucky when this happened. You remember in 2019, you know what happened in 2019. We were very lucky when people in Europe were falling left, right, center, and everybody expected the worst for Africa. And yeah, we were blessed to see that never happened in Africa. As much as they say, we are seeing bodies lying on the floor. You remember the guy that say we expecting bodies lying on the floor on the roads of Africa? It's never happened for some reason. Maybe, I don't know if he's stronger or whatever the reason it is. Why do we want to see this happen again in the most vicious way possible? So let's just put this into perspective again. The biolab is where they work with microorganisms, viruses, bacteria. Sometimes they do it supposedly to try to prevent you and I from getting any, infection, or to acquire enough experience on how to manage in case there was an outbreak of these things. Do you understand? They work with it in lab, they put it into mouse, work with bacteria and viruses in the labs, they inject it into mouse, then they try to cure them so they can have a technique or a strategy on how to cure human beings in case it happens to human beings. Then what they do again in these biolabs, sometimes they will take something that only works within animals, not human beings, only animals. They will tweak it and switch it in a way that it can contaminate human beings as well. Who does that? So you take a little whatever thing, microorganism thing, works with animals or specific types of animals. You tweak it and switch it in a way that it can contaminate human beings too. What are you looking to achieve? So according to them, they're trying to obviously prevent you from getting infected. So what they're going to do is they're going to tweak it and twitch it in a way that it can contaminate human beings. Then they're going to work on something to prevent it from actually getting to you. Then they create something to prevent it from doing you any harm. Is that intelligent, or is that a way to make money? You tell me. Why would somebody in a normal mind state would just take something and tweak it and twitch it in a way that can, infect you? Then his ultimate goal, quote unquote, is perhaps trying to find a way to protect you in case this whatever thing in his initial state would have never contaminated you. They changed it so it could contaminate you. Then they found a cure for it for you. Capitalism for you. Yeah. So Sudan is going through the most right now. And I think these guys need our prayers for real. But also, if there's a lesson we need to learn from this, we should not allow just anything happening into our country. One of the main things was that Russia came to Sudan a while back negotiating to have their naval force, their navy parked in Sudan for whatever reason, from Russia to Sudan. And in return, they will try and negotiate with the United Nations on behalf of Sudan so that whatever embargo that's on Sudan can be lifted. That was the deal they had before the war started. Obviously, nobody else wants Russia to bring their navy to Sudan because it's way too close to whichever country you can imagine. That was the beginning of everything. So we are in time, instead of protecting ourselves, our interests, our kids, our children, our mothers, our fathers, we are looking out for interests for other people, bringing in the military, accepting the navy, the soldiers. I don't know for what reason. And we know with experience that when these people come into your country, they never leave. Why do we accept this as Africans? Look at the case of Afghanistan. Okay, they left 20 years after. Look at Iraq. The people are still there. Look at Syria. Look at all these other countries. Is that what we want for our land? I don't think so. God bless.